Well, oh goodness. Maybe the Washington Post. What we know about the Moscow concert terror attack. Sure. That sounds good, I guess. Yeah, I did. That's what I'm looking up right now, just to have a news article ready to go for it. I have some thoughts on it because there have been some pretty crazy takes on it, both on the pro-Russia and anti-Russia side of things. Funnily enough, I'm the enlightened centrist in this situation. It seems. Uh, and then where is it? See how badly the Russians beat up those terrorists? Yeah, I saw that they got beat up pretty bad in the news articles that I looked up. They're like, yeah, they got dragged into the court and they looked like they had been gotten the shit beaten out of them, which I guess on one level is like, I mean that's obviously pretty bad, but also there are two mitigating factors. That first of all, these people kind of blew up a concert hall, which is not good. You know, you kind of don't talk shit if you're not prepared to get hit. And then I also saw that like the Russia called in the Spetsnaz to deal with it. So that's what you're gonna get with Spetsnaz. Russia is blaming Ukraine. Ukraine is blaming Russia. USA is blaming ISIS. ISIS is blaming ISIS. Every Muslim is banning the US. Uh, yeah, that's a pretty good encapsulation of the sort of blame game that's being played around this. Now, of course, I think that the United States and ISIS are both correct to say ISIS did this, because ISIS, the Islamic State, is not the terror group that it used to be. I also watched a video of one of those terrorists getting his ear cut off and fed to him. Gross. Jesus fucking Christ, dude. Yeah, I know, like, Islamist terrorists be on some different shit, but, like, that's inhumane as fuck. Anyways, I guess if I just want to start with that concert hall terror attack, um, ISIS claimed responsibility pretty quickly, and it fits. I guess it fits their MO for some other stuff. I guess I don't know. Like obviously, any given intelligence actor in this situation, I don't necessarily trust. But ISIS is kind of like this loose network of Islamist militias. They've kind of become that ever since they got BTFO'd out of the Middle East. You know, they don't have that much of a presence there in a territorial sense, so it's like a loose network of Islamist militias that contact each other and that well do various acts of terrorism and skullduggery. I also think ISIS K did it. Yeah, that's right. ISIS K is like that's a different thing. It like well, it's part of that network, but yeah. Um, so from that perspective, it's pretty open and shut as to like who did it. Why they did it is it's I think there were some Caucasian separatist movements that are pretty active in Russia, as well as I believe like I don't know Central Asian nationalism stuff like that. Russia is not the most stable. Like Putin and the current government are holding things together a decent amount. Syria also, yeah, that's right. Um, but there are autonomous regions, oblasts, and whatever in the Caucasus region, in Central Asia, and whatever that are predominantly Muslim. Currently, there are no Caucasian separatists in Russia. You are wrong. There were Caucasian separatists in the ranks of the terrorists that committed this attack. There are Dagestani and Circassian and Chechen separatist groups currently active in Russia. The problem is sometimes they can't really be very vocal about being active because otherwise they would get BTFO'd by the Spetsnaz. Um, uh, so that's what's up. That region of Russia has significant Muslim population, so that's how you get terror attacks like this. But I wanted to, now that I've established kind of how this has all happened, that there is Islamist movement in some places in Russia that is guess in some ways feeding off of, or like, well, maybe not feeding off of, but like it intersects with some separatist movements in Russia, and that's how this attack happened. You know, ISIS took responsibility, so it was, you know, I guess that was them. The other takes on this are, number one, that it was a false flag. No. Or I want to explore those alternate takes on things. So, like, some people on the very anti-Russia side of things have floated the idea that, oh, this attack was a false flag for Putin to, like, gain sympathy from the international community or something like that. He has no objection to killing his own people and whatever. There's no evidence that this was a false flag. And in fact, the severity and scope and like destruction of this attack, as well as the fact that like this attack happening makes Putin look kind of weak, makes me think that it is not a false flag. Because usually when Russia does like a false flag attack, you can tell. You can really tell. I don't know if you guys remember, but a little while back there was a false flag in Moscow also. That was like a drone attack. They were like, "Oh no, Ukraine struck our capital with one of their drones," and it was just like a one lone drone flying in Russian airspace that like crashed into a building, and there was like no meaningful damage. Riding through a forest right now, so much lag. That's all right. Look, all this stuff is going to be uploaded to YouTube. It's going to be available on the VODs page later. If you need to go back and catch something you missed, you know, don't worry about it. So there was that pretty blatant false flag attack by Russia with the one drone thing in Moscow. But this is not that. This is a very real terror attack where many civilians died, and it wasn't just some minor damage to the side of like an apartment building. You know? So that's that dispelled. Also, Putin is relatively secure in his seat of power. He literally just had his main political rival killed. I don't think he would need to do a false flag from like a political calculus perspective. Russia shelled some apartment buildings so they could attack the Chechens. Yeah, that's more characteristic of like the Russian false flag stuff. Not like optimally calculated maximum casualty terror attack on a like concert hall stuff. You know. But then the other perspective, the what I've seen some pro-Russia people say is that this was the Ukrainians, that the Ukrainians orchestrated this terror attack, that like this was done by pro-Ukraine groups at the behest of like the Ukrainian government or something. And while that one's a little bit more plausible, there's no evidence for that either. I mean, I think there was a statement released by a Ukrainian intelligence official that looked pretty bad, because it's like, oh, well, you know, that's what you get when you invade a neighboring country, even though that like had nothing really to do with the Ukrainian, like the invasion of Ukraine and stuff like that. It's kind of goofy. All the evidence that we have right now points to the I think the least complicated, like least convoluted explanation. Hello, welcome back, Dave Motel. But yeah, all the evidence we have with regards to this terror attack in Moscow points to what I think is the like Occam's razor, don't overcomplicate it explanation, which is that you know, the ISIS like ISIS-K or whatever branch of ISIS was active in Russia, committed this terror attack, and then claimed responsibility for it, and that's just kind of how this stuff works. You know, and I don't know if there's a whole lot more to it. It's part of ongoing like political instability in Russia, separatist movements, etc., etc. In fact, I don't know if this attack even has very significant implications for the political situation in Russia. because it's like what would Putin do? Use this as an excuse to be authoritarian? Like, he already is, right? Like, he's already doing that. I don't think he would need to, I don't think there's really anything about this attack in particular. I don't know. I think I've addressed what I need to address, more or less. And I have a feeling, I pulled up a Washington Post article about this. I might check that in a minute. I have a feeling that'll probably say the same things that I had to say about the matter. Even though, obviously, you know, for some American news outlets, I would advise to take it with like, a grain of salt, because the U.S. does have good intelligence. Like, we have very capable intelligence networks that can get really good information really quickly. But, like, they're still liable to exaggerate or embellish, or sometimes even just make shit up if it benefits the U.S., like, very directly. But, you know, this isn't one of those things that the U.S., I think, would really need to make up in order to do that. Gotta go slow on this section. They'll just bomb some Ukrainian cities. Yeah, I mean, like, I could see Russia kind of doing the typical song and dance of like, oh wow, can't believe Ukraine would do this or something. Although I think Russia even acknowledged that, like, this was ISIS that did this. They'll just go and be like, ah, well, you see, actually the real ISIS is in Ukraine, and they'll, like, bomb some Ukrainian cities. Yeah. And there's one thing that I wanted to highlight, because there were some people that were saying, like, man, how could this have happened if Russia had such good security? That was one of the arguments I heard frequently invoked for the false flag thing. It's like, well, how did they even let this happen if they had such good security? They must have known that it was coming. No, it actually is not like that. I know there are some people that really don't want to hear this, but terrorism is just a thing that happens in a nation state, like in a society and stuff. Especially when you have a society that is authoritarian, like Russia in this case, that suppresses certain ethnic and national groups of people. Like, that creates a lot of political tension, and, you know, that creates the motivation for terrorism. However much security you have, you know, however many cavities the security guards strip search you for at the airport, terrorism is going to happen, because where there's a will, there's a way. And in Russia, and in many countries, there is a will for people to commit terrorist actions for political movements. Zero terror attacks in Lithuania and Poland. Yeah, you know why that is? That's because in Lithuania and Poland, things are stable enough that people really don't have the motivation to commit terror attacks. Think about it. There's not a whole lot of significant separatist movements in Lithuania, in Poland. You know, there's not a lot of religious extremist movements, at least not that would be unfriendly to the government there. I have no doubt that in Poland there are some, like, extreme right-wing Catholics, but the government is right-wing Catholic, or at least was for a very long time. There wouldn't be the motivation to commit terrorism in Lithuania or Poland, so it doesn't happen. But in Russia, where it's a very authoritarian government, multi-ethnic environment, where Putin is actively suppressing nationalist movements from other national identities that exist within Russia, there is a substantial reason for people to want to take political action against the government. And since Russia is an authoritarian state and suppresses many conventional means of political action, people resort to terrorism more, especially because the material situation in Russia is much more dire than that in Lithuania or in Poland. Lithuania and Poland are on average a little bit wealthier, or at least actually quite a bit wealthier than in Russia. Average income is higher. People aren't struggling as badly in Poland and Lithuania as they are in Russia right now. And that also contributes to this. So that's how this sort of thing happens, and that's why the constant, like, focus on surveillance and ramping up security and all that is never going to prevent terrorism that would have otherwise happened. Yeah, but we have higher prices? Yeah, I know. That's part of being a developed country. The US has higher prices than Poland or Lithuania, but our income level is also much higher. So there's not a lot of terrorism that happens in the United States. It still happens, but not very much. We have similar prices and your wages are several times bigger. Okay, then. It could also be the case that Lithuania is not as ethnically diverse as the United States, and there's less existing tension in Lithuania compared to the U.S. Because in the U.S., when you get ethnic diversity, you get far-right reactionary movements, a lot of them. And those far-right reactionary movements are kind of looking for excuses to do some skullduggery and shit. And so in the United States, they have a much more readily available excuse. In Lithuania, it's actually not as much. Granted, you know, you've shown me, I think, some videos of far-right groups doing some very silly stuff. But not to the level that would amount to terrorism, necessarily. Hey guys, editing Y2K here as a disembodied sound insert this time. I want to address something that I may have miscommunicated in this section. I did not mean to make it sound like ethnic diversity was responsible directly for an increased risk of terrorism in a given country. Rather, what I meant to communicate was that when there is ethnic diversity and when there is ethnic suppression in a given country, that can increase instances of terrorism, either by an ethnic minority against the state or by an ethnic majority against the ethnic minority. This is quite visible in places like the US and Russia, where there are ethnic minorities who are in a very disadvantaged position relative to other ethnic groups. And just to be clear, when there is ethnic diversity in a country and there is relatively little or no ethnic suppression, when there's not a racial or ethnic class hierarchy, then terrorism really doesn't happen. So that's that. Largest ethnic minority here is Polish at 7%. Yeah, and that doesn't really strike me as something that would like create so much tension that people would like do suicide bombings over and stuff like that, or mass shootings or something like that. But in the United States, where there are double-digit percentages of quite vast, like, different groups of, racial minorities, ethnic minorities, immigrants, and stuff like that, right-wingers get very antsy and very, like, well, terrorist-y. Terroristic. There we go. Yeah, we soloed the suicide part. Yeah, I'm not going to deny that there's it's a mental health problem in the northern regions of Europe. But anyways, yeah, I just wanted to I wanted to talk a little bit about that, just to understand the mechanics of how does terrorist sentiment arise, because there are predictable conditions that can that you can look at to see whether or not the political situation is likely to turn more violent in a given country, and those circumstances are a lot more present in Russia than in Lithuania, in Poland, or in the United States. We have the highest suicide rate in the world? That's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. We also have the happiest people in the world under 35. Happiness is kind of a dumb metric. Because like, how happy are people? That's a self-reported thing. When you go to the UN and they ask for, like, the statistics on how happy are people in a given country, that stuff is self-reported. People are liable to be wrong. So all the sad people kill themselves. I mean, that's part of it. And a much better metric of how good is life in a given country or in a given region is income and quality of life statistics regarding, like, I don't know, life expectancy, health, infant mortality, availability of medical care and certain public services, other stuff like that. South Korea passed us? That's not a good sign. Wait, in terms of what, I should ask? If it's in terms of suicide rate, then, I mean, actually, that's just not good for South Korea. That's comparatively, like, good for Lithuania, I guess? I don't know. South Korea is pretty fucked, so. I think the average work week in South Korea is something like 60 hours. It's absolutely bonkers. Should also look at the interrogation video. No, I'm not looking at the interrogation video. I would I already know what I'm gonna find there. I'm gonna find some like Russian fucking military Spetsnaz dudes roughing up some terrorists, like beating the absolute shit out of them. And it's gonna make me sad because like, damn, these people did some horrible, did some horrible shit, but they're still people, and these guys are just beating them up. No beatings there? Oh, okay, never mind then. Okay, so now in addition to the US and ISIS saying that it was ISIS, Russia is also saying that it was ISIS here in this Washington Post article. Uh, the assault on a sprawling shopping and entertainment venue on the outskirts of Moscow has shocked Russians, with large crowds laying thousands of flowers at the site of the attack over the weekend. Uh, and President Vladimir Putin's promising to exact justice for what he said was a cynically planned and barbaric terrorist attack. 4 suspects have been arrested, Putin said, and the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, has claimed responsibility for the attack. Okay. Oh, wait, no, this is just the Washington Post saying ISIS has claimed responsibility, intercut with some stuff that Putin has said. Okay. Facts. At least 137 people were killed. Not good. Oh, never mind. No, Putin did not refer to the Islamic State during his Saturday address, despite its claim of responsibility, and instead asserted that the accused were moving towards Ukraine before they were caught, saying that a window was prepared for them from the Ukrainian side to cross the state border. Kyiv denied any involvement. So they might have been going to Ukraine, but the reason they were probably doing that is just because Ukraine was a not friendly, or is a not friendly country to Russia, given that they are at war. And that tends to be what happens. It's kind of like how Edward Snowden and I believe Julian Assange or whoever went and sought asylum in Russia. They weren't Russian agents or anything, but they knew that if they were in Russia, Russia's not very friendly to America, and that Russia wouldn't immediately want to like extradite them or something. That's probably what's going on here. Except, Julian Assange and Edward Snowden did some good whistleblowing things, whereas these guys are responsible for a terror attack. A lot of the propaganda agents are blaming the CIA for the attack. That doesn't surprise me too much. Yeah, okay, like you said, it's ISIS-K. Yeah, wow, it's actually almost exactly what you said. ISIS-K was probably responsible for this, and then Russia said, yeah, let's go bomb Ukrainian cities about it, or something. Probably suffering a fate worse than hell right now. What, the guys that committed the terror attack? Maybe. I mean, Russian prisons are not known to be especially humane. If U.S. prisons are so bad, and then like Russia's are probably worse than that. You see how scary it was in the interrogation footage? Okay. I still don't think I want to look at the interrogation footage. It wouldn't tell me anything that I don't already know. It tells a lot. Nothing that I don't know. Like, yeah, no shit. Russia mistreats prisoners and stuff. Like, it's not super surprising. How they were contacted? Well, no, I don't really care that much about that. Like, the small nitty-gritty and logistics of a terror attack are not of any particular interest to me. Because, like I said, I know how terror attacks like that happen. Where there's a will, there's a way. Why they did it? You know how much they were paid for that attack? It's literally not relevant. How much they were paid is not relevant to the political implications of that attack. Why they did it might be of more interest. $10,000? I mean, that's a lot in Russia. Imagine killing 130 people for 10,000. I mean, these guys did it. I don't think you need to imagine that hard. Moscow terror attack. Motivations? Maybe? Why would the Islamic State attack Russia? What would Putin's response be? $76. Oh, per person. Yeah, no, that's not a lot. Huh. Well, For ideological motivations like terrorism, I don't think you would need all that much money to convince people. Like I said, if there's like if it is what I think it is, that there was separatism and like political motivations behind this attack, that they really didn't like Putin's government for one reason or another, that's going to be a strong enough motivation to basically overlook any monetary gain you could have from this. You know, it probably the only concern for money, as far as money goes for them, would be like, how do we get enough money to do the attack, right? Ow. Most of them weren't even from Russia. That's probably that probably plays into their political motivations. Yeah, no, wait. I do remember. I saw one of the suspects, or like the people who allegedly did the attack, was like a hairdresser, like a barber or something, living in Moscow, but was from Tajikistan, one of those Central Asian countries, like one of the stans, um, which makes sense. Tajikistan, yes. Yeah, a lot of those countries, you know, despite them being independent, they still have a lot of, like, Russia still has a lot of influence over them, and maybe that has something to do with it. You know, because, like, there's Russian aligned governments and stuff in those countries, and they might not like that very much, for like I said, for one reason or another. Guardian, what's up? What do you got for me? Why would the Islamic State attack Russia? Good question. Islamic State leaders have long seen attacks against distant targets as an integral part of their extremist projects. Such operations, when successful, terrorize their enemies, but also mobilize existing supporters and attract new ones. Okay, so it's like the operating as usual kind of thing for the Islamic State to do an attack like this, which makes sense, I guess. Often targets are determined by what resources are available. Okay, so that's why the concert hall, just because they could, you know, like the best available target for them. In the past 18 months, here we go. This is probably the main motivation relevant to this case. The Islamic State has made a concerted effort to recruit Central Asian militants through its Afghan branch known as the Islamic State Khorasan Province, ISKP. ISIS also claims credit for a lot of attacks they don't do. Yeah, that's true. But with the pattern of the Islamic State recruiting a lot of Central Asian militants, this fits. This really does fit the bill. Like, I don't know who else it could be. Unless there's, like, another militant group operating out of, like, the Caucasus or someplace. So I feel like in this case, it's like a process of elimination thing, and, like, really it could... I think ISIS is the only reasonable guess here. Dude, as fucked up as it is to sound, as it sounds to say, rather, a lot of times I feel like ISIS, like, in the whole, like, terrorism sort of, I don't know, vein of political action, ISIS is really just playing for a love of the game, if that makes sense. They're just doing terrorism because, like, fuck yeah, I love terrorism, I guess. You know? Very, very weird, because, like, you know, their stated goal, at least from back in the day when I remember first learning about them, was like, yeah, we want to make the caliphate, or whatever, the Islamic caliphate. Something like that. But they'll just be saying, like, yep, we did that, we did that, we did that. Also, we did all of these attacks. Some of them are attacks that they actually didn't do, but they're just like, yes, we just do terrorist attacks. That's what we do. It's like, damn, alright. That was my own fake item box, wasn't it? God damn it. Please hit. Yes! He hit the green shell! I'm kind of in the clear, like, maybe a little bit. Alright. A lot of Muslims, from what I saw, say it's the CIA wanting to make Muslims look bad. I think that is wrong. And I think that also does a disservice to Muslims. Muslims, if you're not ISIS, you can just say so, and like we'll get it. The world isn't a fucking like the world isn't as Islamophobic a place as it was immediate post 9/11. And some Israelis are on TikTok blaming Hamas. Of course they are. Israelis fucking they would stub their toe and blame it on Hamas. That's how brain poisoned they are by bullshit. Um, that's like when you see fucking Christian nationalists go and shoot up a school because I don't know the white race is being replaced by Mexicans or some shit. Mexicans who are also Christian, by the way. And then like what people are going to look at that and say all Christianity is bad? No, like of course there's a little bit more of a current of Islamophobia than like anti-Christian sentiment because Christianity is the majority religion in like the wealthiest countries in the world. But people generally understand in both cases like just because a fucking far right extremist religious group did this terror attack is not like representative of that religion, you know? There are 2 billion Muslims in the world. They're not like and people know that they're not that. Just realized I wasn't connected to Bluetooth my earbuds, so I was blasting the whole bus with your stream this whole time. Well, I hope they found it entertaining. Ah, okay. So there's the added benefit. You know, I was saying that like from this article, it said that ISIS was recruiting specifically from Central Asian countries. Uh, being Russian speaking or even Russian nationals, a lot of the recruits can easily reach a target in Moscow, offering multiple new opportunities for attacks. Okay, so that's why. Um, Russia has been in the crosshairs of ISIS for many years. Their leaders, like many Islamic militants, are mindful of Russian support for the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. A key point made by ISIS propaganda from Pakistan to Nigeria is that Moscow is part of the broader coalition of Christian or Western forces engaged in the existential 1400-year-old battle against Islam. ISIS statements claiming responsibility for the attack boasted of killing Christians. Okay, so all pretty typical of ISIS and makes sense for their ideological motivations. Um, you know, with Assad in Syria, you might be wondering like, why do they not like Assad? Assad is a fucking brutal dictator who kills civilians. They love that, but they don't like the fact that he's secular. Assad is more of like a secular dictator. It doesn't really have that much of a agenda with regards to religion.